It's a classic computing interview session.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. And today we're going to talk to Michael Nadeau, and we're going to discuss a book that he published, 20, going on 24 years ago,
Right. Yeah.
and called Collectible Microcomputers. And I'll put a
Mhm.
better quality picture on the screen. So I wanted to start off and just read this, Michael. So, of course, this is 2002, but about the author. Since 1981, Michael Nadeau has been an editor for computer publications including 80 Micro for Tandy TRS 80 computer owners, Hot Cocoa for Tandy color computer owners, and Byte. He has also published many articles about computers in magazines such as PC World, Family PC, and Information Security. He is also the author of the Byte Guide to CD-ROM by Osborne McGraw-Hill, 1994. Nadeau collects computer ephemera,
Mhm.
brochures, press kits, magazines, and other literature associated with all types of computing technology. He also acquires the occasional old computer, space and wallet permitting. Nadu lives in Salem, New Hampshire with his wife Lynn and daughters Julie and Claire.
Mhm.
So all that is still exactly the same, right?
Not really. I'm now in Peterborough, New Hampshire.
Okay. Still in New Hampshire though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, again, thanks for joining me, and I'm so excited to talk about your book, even though I know it's old news for you. But I think,
Mhm.
it's interesting to look back on it. So, I guess, just tell everyone a little bit more about yourself, what you're comfortable with, between then and now, or anything you want to mention then.
Sure. Well, it's been over 20 years since I wrote the book, and since then I've continued in technology publishing in a few different areas. I was in covering ERP systems for a long time, and most recently I retired from CSO Online, which is a publication for cybersecurity experts. Uh, I retired in 2024. And since retiring, I've been focusing actually on energy technology and doing volunteer work in that area as well. So that's been interesting because you know everything uses energy, and with data centers and AI, there's going to be a greater demand for it. So I think
Yeah.
that's an interesting area.
So in this introduction from the book anyway, it mentions that you did collect a few old computers at the
Right.
time, I guess. And do you remember some of the ones you had back then? Any
Well,
do you still have? Or
actually, I just a couple years ago I sold the last one that I had. I had a brand new in the box Basis 108, which was a Apple II clone.
wow.
Former K-Pro dealer reached out to me and said he had this. He wanted to get rid of it. Um, so I wound up acquiring that from him. And my intention was I was either going to preserve it or it was a base model. I was going to get disk drives and use it. And it sat for a couple of years and I did nothing with it. So it's now in a museum in Tennessee. Uh,
Okay.
Somebody bought it there.
What just offhand, we're in Tennessee.
It's geek.
So they're Nashville, Memphis, no,
I
Knoxville,
bel
no, somewhere else.
I can't remember where in
Okay, that's all right.
Tennessee. It's not Nashville,
Okay. Maybe
but
later if you think of it, you can send it to me and I can put it
right.
in. Um, so now going back, so when did you start writing this book? And what kind of led you, what
Well,
made you do it?
I had left Byte and to do freelance, and I just this is something that I've always had in my mind to do. And my original intention was not to do a price guide. I wanted to do like more of a field guide
Hmm.
and just help people who were getting interested in the hobby to know what they were looking at when they were out there seeing an old computer. But it was a requirement of the publisher, so I had to do research on prices and all that. Uh, so freelancing, I had more flexibility and time to do it, and I had a lot of material, so it probably. I wrote the book in about 4 months because I think that was the deadline that the publisher gave me. Uh, and there's a lot of back and forth because there's a lot of material that got cut actually. So, um,
And it's a pretty sizable book. I mean, not just
right.
it's a kind of an oversized book, I guess you might say, but it's 160 pages. So I mean, there's a lot of content in it.
Hmm.
700 microcomputers, from 1971 to 1993, over 340 photos. And so I was going to mention, yeah, so it was published through Schiffer Publishing, and they
Hmm.
specialize in collectors,
Yes.
collectible guides, and so
And
on.
they're still in business and they're still selling the book. They still have some in the warehouse.
Yeah, and there'll be a link in the show notes. I found that. And of
Yes.
course, it's still listed on Amazon where you could buy it
Mhm.
used. I think was it? I have to look again whether there was any new from there. Um, so yeah, in the beginning, you have an introducing collectible microcomputers, how to use this book, and then tips for collecting and evaluating microcomputers. I know
Mhm.
I'll put it up on the screen. Can't really see it because of the filtering on the video here. And then of course it gets right into alphabetical on the different machines.
Mhm.
So I know we had talked briefly before the interview. So there was a guide before your book
Yes.
going back to 1993, which is like
Mhm.
really early on. That was right when I started getting into making my newsletter and collecting and stuff. But it's called A Collector's Guide to
Mhm.
Personal Computers and Pocket Calculators by Dr. Thomas F. Haddock. So I know
Mhm.
you mentioned you had this book.
Yes.
So maybe just take a moment, like what, did this inspire you? What'd you think about it? And so on.
Well, actually, I remember getting a copy of that book sent to me when I was at Byte. Um, and I was saying, my response was, damn, I wanted to do this. But and I think Dr. Haddock did a really good job with it. He took a little bit different approach than I did. He
Mhm.
covers a lot of peripherals. He also covers like calculators and pocket computers. I wanted to do something that was a little bit more focused and able to dig a bit more deeper into the system level. But I also I have a little bit more backstory on a lot of the computers than he does, and I think that was because of the format of his book. It didn't really allow for a lot of that.
And I purchased not this
Hmm.
one, the original one I had. I purchased it right when it came out, and I believe I did a review on it in my newsletter. And
Hmm.
I really liked it. My one critical thing about his book was now, so this is 1993, that's pre-eBay. So,
Right.
so as far as the values in here, I thought they were very arbitrary, in 1993,
Yeah.
and it totally depended on where you live. It still does a lot on where you
Hmm.
live and stuff, but especially back then, how readily you could find some of this stuff
Hmm.
versus how much it's worth and so
Yeah.
on. But yeah, it's just a guide to identify a bunch of them. It's got a lot of stuff at the time I'd never heard of, and I still
Hmm.
occasionally, reference it. So, um, let's see. When you started to do your book, around, I'm going to guess around 2001, right? Approximately. You said it took you a few months, and
Yeah.
maybe 2001 it was published in
It was
2002.
yeah. It was probably around 2001.
So you chose the era between 1971 with a cutoff of 1993. So,
Right.
why that year particularly, do you think?
Well, I was trying to remember why. But I wanted to get the multimedia PCs into the book because I thought they would eventually become, good collectibles.
Hmm.
And 1993 just seemed like a good cutoff to get the major systems from that era in. Uh, but otherwise, it was kind of arbitrary. I wanted to get it around 10 years old.
Yeah. And I know in the hobby, there's always been discussion/arguments
Mhm.
about, what defines a vintage computer. And I know the generic
Mhm.
thing was kind of 20 years
Yeah.
old. But you're right. And by 1993, I mean, Windows 3.1 pretty much was out and
Mhm.
dominating. The Wintel market was dominating everything. And that was the very early point of multimedia computers.
Yeah.
So things had kind of uh, stabilized. Was that what you're saying? There wasn't a lot of diversity happening necessarily by that point. So would let's see, what's the next question I was going to ask you? So looking back, at these 700
Mhm.
microcomputers in here and like some of the values you had to come up with. Does anything like surprise you now, or what do you have any comments on maybe what you thought they'd be worth then in the future and now
Well,
looking back on it?
well, I went back. I went into eBay and looked at what some of the popular systems are selling for now. And what one thing that surprised me is that the prices haven't really changed that much.
Hmm.
And I think that's the eBay effect
Yeah,
because you know back then not many people in the hobby, and but the eBay kind of exposes just how many of these systems are out there.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so that can depress prices in some areas. Let's look at what determines the value of a system in any hobby. It's historical significance. Uh, it can be, it's an impact on culture. It could be uh, uh, the design, whether that's aesthetic or engineering. Uh, and when you look at that, I think what's maintained prices are gone up in price are anything, for example, that Steve Jobs touched.
Hmm.
Uh, because a lot of the systems that he was involved with check all the boxes. And what that does is it means it's going to create a high degree of nostalgia
Right.
among the community. People who had those systems back then want them again, or couldn't afford them back then and want them now are now can afford to pay a decent price for them.
Yeah, I
So
agree. I think that's obviously rarity does matter, but
yes,
like I tell people, just because something's rare does not equate value
right.
necessarily.
And with this hobby too, there's another factor. Like you could have a system like the MITS Altair that checks all the boxes,
Right. Significance, historical,
but
even
it
rarity to a certain extent.
but it's a special kind of collector that can really
Yeah.
enjoy that because you have to have a certain type of not technical knowledge in
Hmm.
order to use it, to maintain it. The older systems are kind of fragile.
Hmm.
So not it's not a class for everybody to collect.
And anybody who's like directly nostalgic, like they
Mhm.
had one or always wanted one, they were there or whatever.
Mhm.
These we're all pretty old. I mean, I was too young even then,
Yeah,
so they're all pretty old, right? And
yeah.
but yeah, interesting. The Altair, which just celebrated its 50th anniversary last
Mhm.
year, and of course this is
Yes.
Apple's 50th now this year. They've gone up in value, but a really clean, nice, equipped, restored, working Altair just as a median, it seems to be about $4,000, which is good, but not that much more than it was 10 years ago, 20 years
Right.
ago. It's not extraordinarily valuable like an Apple
Mhm.
One or a Lisa One, the two most
Yeah.
expensive collectible computers. I was gonna make another comment is about eBay. Like, do you like Antiques Roadshow? Do you ever watch that?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay, well, they I watch it fairly regularly with my wife, I guess there's new ones. I don't know, but some of the older ones. But there was a time late 2017, 18, 19 in there, and what they did is they would replay older shows from like 15 and 20
Mhm.
years later, and then they get to the valuation, right?
Mhm.
And then it pauses, and then they roll out, here's what it's valued now. Did
Yes.
it go up or down or whatever? And a lot of things they go down. And
Mhm.
and the ones that go now down are the ones that are usually mass produced. And I think that's the eBay effect because something comes up on eBay and it gets a good return. And the people go,
Mhm.
"Oh my God, I've got one of those." And suddenly 10 of them come out of the closet and go on
Mhm.
eBay. And of course, they're not going to get anywhere near what that first one did
Right.
because the rarity they're not as rare as people might have thought. So I've seen that happen a lot. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm still surprised that some of the stuff, like the museum that got that computer from you, that's probably kind of mind blowing. That, oh my God, how did you get that? Anybody
Yeah.
talking to them, like, I can't believe you just got one of these new in the box because you've been sitting on it for all those years, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that happens. Let's see. What do you think about like how would you compare? in 2002, the hobby was growing, definitely.
Hmm.
And I know you acknowledged some people in the book, and Salem Ishmael, who started the Vintage Computer Festival, Cameron Kaiser, Tom Owad from Apple
Hmm.
Footer. You talked to quite a few enthusiasts and people
Yes.
that were at the forefront of the hobby in
Yeah.
2002. So now, I mean, it's still a niche, but it's
Mhm.
like, what do you think about that? How it's grown?
Well, back then, it seemed like everybody knew each other in the hobby or knew of each other in the hobby because
Hmm.
really you had Usenet was had a lot of forums where people could connect. You had a lot of websites that were like people putting up their personal museums on
Yeah.
online, uh,
Mhm.
and you had a lot of in-person clubs, mostly specific to a brand. Um, but now you've got YouTube videos. You've got a lot of bloggers out there, and
Yeah.
uh, so it's a lot more varied. And what that has done, I think, is fragmented the hobby.
Hmm. Yeah, because again, 2002 is pre YouTube, which is
Right.
there's some pretty big YouTubers out there for vintage computer, all kinds of, tons of content. And of course, by 2002, though, you had the Vintage Computer Festival in California, now called
Hmm.
the Vintage VCF West, but the original one was pretty much established, and then the one on the East Coast had just been established.
Hmm.
Um, I think they had to obviously skip, was it 2001 because of 9/11, but by 2002 there was like the second one.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so it was just kind of start, really growing, but very
Mhm.
niche, way more niche then.
Right.
But
Yeah,
it's
and there's generational differences now too,
yeah, yeah.
because you've got people who grew up with PCs and like the multimedia PCs and portable computers, and they have totally different interests in what they collect now than somebody who grew up with computers in the 80s or 90s.
And gaming consoles,
Yeah.
there's a whole
Yeah.
collectability, which
Yeah.
that this drove that as well. So let's see. Your book is it's praised for its fascinating historical notes and
Hmm.
anecdotes. I can never say that word right. Is there one particular story about a specific manufacturer that you can remember or failed computer that like really fascinated you to write about or the
Well,
cover?
one of my favorite computers in the book was the Ampere WS-1,
Okay,
which was a Japanese.
so I can
It
find
was a
it.
clamshell design laptop from 1985. And what was interesting about it is they were one of the first manufacturers to actually deal with the aesthetics of the case. And they got the guy who designed the Datsun 280Z to design the case.
Oh,
But it was just,
that's really interesting. Yeah.
but it had in '85, it had a 68,000 CPU, which was 4 years before Apple put one in a portable.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, I like that.
it had a multitasking operating system, and its built-in language was APL, not BASIC.
And I'll make sure to
Yeah,
make sure it's clear for everybody, but that came out pretty clear, I think.
yeah,
They'll focus, but I'll put a screenshot up. That I like that case a lot. But
yeah.
you
I,
never
I
saw one
have
in
a.
real life, or you did?
I'm sorry.
Did you ever see one in real life,
I
or
have never seen
no?
one in the wild, but apparently they did have a U.S. distributor. I have a set of black and white photographs for it, so I know it existed.
And it uses that little cassette, like I had a work slate. Do you remember that one?
Mhm.
And it used a
Yes.
little micro cassette. So that's pretty
Yeah.
neat. So you identified and you provided information for more than 700.
Hmm.
And this is before, before this, well, this during the internet, but before really it expanded, it was very limited in 2001, I guess, compared to
Hmm.
now. So what other resources? I know you mentioned, I guess you talked to some people too, but
Right.
can you talk about that, some of your research
Well,
uh,
most
issues or
I I early on developed a habit of saving. Uh, as you said, I started my career in tech publishing in 1981.
okay.
So I like to hang on to press kits and other literature. for the business, and I still had most of that.
And people are obviously the manufacturers were sending all this stuff to the magazines. They want you to cover
Right,
it. So you,
right,
yeah, okay.
yeah. It was a lot of material. When they closed down a magazine, I would take its library. At one point, when I was working at Byte, management decided to get rid of their library, which went back to the earliest days of microcomputers, and they were just going to toss it. So me and a few other editors grabbed what we could.
Maybe just say a little more about Byte if you don't mind. So what was the state of Byte computer in Byte magazine, I'm sorry, in 2001? I don't remember when it ceased to publish,
I,
but
I left I left Byte in '94,
oh, okay.
and I left Byte on my own because I did not like the way the publication was going. It was owned by McGraw-Hill at the time, and McGraw-Hill very clearly wanted Byte to be like PC Magazine because PC had a lot of ads,
Yeah,
um, and they didn't think the publication was gonna survive unless it was more what they call product oriented. Not
yeah,
that Byte wasn't, but we knew our audience. Our audience was more technically inclined. They wanted to know how things worked
hmm
and why something was designed the way it was. And we had an audience for that. And once you started to change that, that audience, went away.
yeah.
So uh, yeah, the Byte was sold a couple of times after that, and in 2001, was it Miller? No, I don't think Miller Freeman owned it at that point. But yeah, it was in decline. The magazine was quite thin.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I know one of my favorite books, I believe I still have it. I believe it was published in 94, but it was called The Best of Byte. And of course it
Yeah,
was old articles and stuff. But then I think I still have one issue from like I believe 94, 95, somewhere there. And it was kind of like a 20-year, probably 95, where it was like a 20-year retrospective going back or whatever, which is a
yeah.
really good issue. And I didn't buy it otherwise very much, but you
The
know,
international version of that was almost 900 pages, I think.
wow.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, do you think there was, unfortunately a little bit of truth in what they thought they had to do that like they weren't going to survive if they didn't do that maybe for advertising or
Uh, the publication it had more to do with the growth rate than whether or not the publication was profitable. And they did what a lot of publishers do is they brought in a consultant because they didn't trust what the people internally were telling them.
isn't that something?
And yeah, and
The two Bobs.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Just what
uh,
do you do here?
yeah,
No.
yeah. And actually, the more interesting story is how 80 Micro came to its end.
Okay.
It,
Yeah, go ahead
I
and
was
tell it.
the I was the last editor of 80 Micro, which is
Uh,
the TRS-80 publication, and uh, we thought things were going good on the business plan. We were on track. We were going to make a profit, and this was in the mid 80s. So the staff felt pretty good about it. And then one day we get the word, well, we're closing the magazine. We're rolling it into PC World because a consultant told us that the company can make more money by adding circulation to PC World
wow.
than having 80 micro run out the rest of the year. So I stayed on with the company, but like 3, 4 weeks later, I get a call from the circulation director of PC World, who says all your readers are ending
Are
their
canceling,
subscription.
right? Yeah.
Says why is that? And I said, well, I'm not surprised. You should have talked to me before you made this
Yeah,
decision
they didn't want
because
to read
they
PC
read
World with a little snippet of 80
right.
micro,
They
right?
read 80 micro because they don't want to read PC
Right.
World.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's what I would have guessed.
yeah,
So, in the book, in your tips for collecting and evaluating microcomputers, chapter two, at the end here, it has a word of caution. I'm going to read this one part. Now, again, this is 2002, 2001 or so you wrote it. The
yeah,
one potential exception is with early computers that use electrolytic, I said it right,
yeah.
capacitors. Microcomputers produced between 1974 and 1978 before the mass market era represent one of the most rewarding and most challenging areas for enthusiasts and old computers. Okay, well,
Mhm.
anyway, so some of the red flags, words of caution here, they remain very true, even more
Yes,
so now, because now the whole thing about capacitors is pretty much across to everything
yes.
pre, what would you say, late 80s or something.
And what, and this is because of eBay that I put this in there because people are finding these things in closets, relative dies or whatever. They want to put it on eBay, so they find the system. The first thing they do is plug it in, see if it works.
Yeah,
Uh,
and then poo pow, yeah,
yeah,
white smoke, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it was. I'm sure it still is, but it was a big issue back then.
hmm Yeah, it's again, if you watch a lot of these videos and
Mhm.
people and forums and stuff, recapping, it's like,
Right.
if you're going to be in this hobby and really be hands-on, you need to learn how to recap.
Yes.
Especially now I can't think of the one. There's one notorious type of capacitor that always blows up.
Yeah.
I'm not so hands-on with like recapping and stuff. I can do
Mhm.
a lot of other basic fixes. So let's see. Out of the 700 plus machines you listed, and that which one did you consider the holy grail for a collector to find in 2002? Maybe you mentioned a couple, one or two. And then what do you think as compared to now?
I think back then, and I think it's probably still true today, the Apple One
Yeah, it's just
is
worth a
the
lot
obvious
more.
one. Yeah, and for probably not for the best reasons because it's got a lot of publicity because several of them have sold for a lot of money. The one Henry Ford Museum paid over $1 million for theirs.
hmm
Um, I don't think they're bringing that much money now. Uh,
No, they've gone down the last
yeah,
few auctions. Yeah, at least less than half of that.
yeah. Um, but I think because of the historical and cultural significance of Apple, that's still true. But really, I think it depends on the collector. Every collector is going to have their own holy grail.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're a Commodore person, you might want a Max machine, for example, or um, it's really hard to say what it is.
There's one particular auction house, and it's in the United States called R&R Auctions, and they've been
Yes.
sort of you've been following them, and they specialize in they do obviously other auctions, but they've been doing a lot of
Yeah.
Regular Apple auctions, and so I've kind of been tracking Apple leases, but I
Mhm.
pay attention to Apple One. So off the top of my head right now, I think obviously it's very limited Apple Ones, but if
Mhm.
you have an Apple One, uh, I don't even know if it matters. I guess it does matter if it works, but not as much is my impression.
Mhm.
But probably, $300,000. So, getting a little more if it works, a little less maybe is
Yeah.
kind of the going rate. And if you have a Lisa one, um, they've come down too because they had jacked up to maybe
Mhm.
70, $80,000. So they maybe more like 40, $50,000. But again, depending on if it works and been restored or
Yeah.
whatever.
It's interesting because I on the email list of a German auction house that specializes in scientific instruments, and they usually have a few systems like Lisa's or Macintoshes or whatever in their auctions, and
Is
they
it
bring
Brecker?
Brecker,
Brecker?
yes,
Is that it? Okay.
yes, and they bring decent prices there. So there's some crossover in that market. And I know my impression is that market in Europe is stronger for the scientific instrument than in the US.
But what attracts you? What do you think are interesting machines to collect? That are outside your book. They're made afterward.
Yeah. Well, it's beginning of the smartphone phone
Yep.
era.
Yep.
So that's what I would I would focus on.
Hmm.
I think the early iPhones, um, uh, some of the very experimental handheld computers that were out there back then would be
Yeah, a lot of handhelds all came out after
yeah.
1993. There were some, obviously the when I say Scion and the Atari portfolio was out by
Right.
1993, but
And you have
since then you have all the Palms and all different handhelds and of course smartphones and
mhm,
everything else.
you know, Motorola, a lot of interesting approaches to that market. And I do know people who are collecting that now, and there's some um, challenges to collecting that. First of all, it's a lot of them don't work on modern networks, so you
Yeah,
can't.
right.
They're basically just to look at, and they're also the materials that they use in the cases, the plastics, tended to deteriorate over time.
I had a couple of them over the years, but I had an Amstrad, I think it was called the Notepad. It was kind of their
Mhm.
version of the Newton.
Yeah.
And then, but I know there's lots of other examples, but it had that rubberized case.
Hmm.
And then the rubber it just became sticky and it was just like you couldn't even
Yeah.
handle it anymore. And I
Yeah.
know that that happens with, I can't think of other examples, other computers. And apparently there's a way you can remove the rubber now.
Yeah. But eventually it just removes all the material.
Yeah,
'Cause- yeah.
but it just gets sticky and nasty to try to handle. And so,
I've been to a couple
and
of
somewhat recently, I mean,
DCF shows, yes. And actually in October, I'm speaking at uh,
oh, you had
the
mentioned that.
the
Yeah.
Tandy Assembly event in Cincinnati.
And my friend Randy Kindig will be there.
Yes, actually, Randy just contacted me on LinkedIn for something else, but yeah.
Oh, well, here's the last question then. Do you think there's maybe not in a physical book, but I know there's people and they do values and stuff. But what do you think about like someone doing a modern version, a field guide, maybe with values and stuff?
I think it needs to be online uh,
Yeah,
because it's something that you need to constantly update, especially if you're going to have prices in there.
and reference maybe auctions outside eBay and other
Right.
eBay and so on.
And I've put a lot of the content online, and I haven't updated the site in a while, but I do have a website with a lot of this content on there. And just the interaction with people who see it and say, "Oh, I used to work at this company," and they give you a lot of information about the company and the products that you wouldn't otherwise get.
Anyway, I appreciate talking to you and you
Okay.
coming on. So anyone interested, you can buy a copy. It's worth having. Thanks for listening, and please check out some of my other interviews at classiccomputing.com.